podcast world. What's up? Chad Belding back at you. Another episode of This Life Ain't For Everybody. Thank you all so much for subscribing, leaving ratings and reviews, telling your friends and family about us. The audience continues to grow. We're about a year old now, and I couldn't be happier with what's going on. Today's episode of the podcast is a special one. I am a huge fan of my guest today. I don't know how to explain it other than he is a true American. I think you could say a true American, from humble beginnings to high school wrestling career to the United States military to Olympic and college wrestling career to combat sports Hall of Famer in the UFC. And there's too many accolades to name. Randy Couture, thank you for being here, my man.
Thanks, Chad. I appreciate it, brother. How you been?
I've been doing good. I just been, it seems like every conversation starts off the same lately with, man, what weird times we're living through. And where you're sitting right now, I've been to Vegas a lot of times in my life. I live in Reno, Nevada. I can't imagine the Strip shut down. Is it true?
Yeah, it's true. It's pretty weird. We drove the motorcycle down there the other night just to look at it. And, they're doing a lot of asphalt work on the Strip right now because there's no traffic. There's literally nobody there. They got a police car parked out in front of every casino with their lights on, just so that there's a presence there in case somebody gets a crazy idea and wants to try to break in or something. They've got heart shapes in all the hotels in the windows. They turn on the lights in the rooms in the shape of a heart in just about all the hotels going down the Strip. So that's pretty cool. But it's pretty weird to see it all dead, nobody there.
Well, you've had some of the greatest nights of your career in that city. Is that safe to say?
I've had some pretty good nights at a couple of the arenas here in Las Vegas, for sure.
I can't imagine, I don't know. I just don't even know how to, there's nothing else there really, is there? I mean, Vegas is awesome all the way around, but as far as people understand, would you agree with me, Randy, that Vegas is kind of become world renowned on just like this one street that is packed, and they call it the Strip, and you have the old Strip and the newer Strip. But you got Lake Mead, and you have you got Summerlin, and you have Red Rocks, and you have all of the surrounding areas. The football stadium's about to open up with the Raiders, but man, and that's pretty close to the Strip. But isn't it crazy that city can develop that reputation and do that amount of revenue with literally like one block, which it is a large block. It's a lot of blocks, I guess, but one street. It's crazy, right?
Well, it feels, everything's so big, it seems like it's all just right there. Let's just walk over there. But then you start making that walk and realize it's a lot bigger than you think.
It's true.
It's crazy how much this town's grown. There is a lot of other industry here besides the casino industry, but the casino industry is certainly first and foremost the biggest and kind of sets the tone for everything else. I mean, look what the Golden Knights have been doing. They've kind of raised the bar for hockey with their pregame shows and their halftime shows and all the things that they're doing Vegas style. It's been pretty cool to see and fun to watch. I'm excited to see what the Raiders do here. And I think that's a sign of how far this city has come. I think because of the mob roots and things that were here in the old days of Vegas, I think professional athletics were kind of scared to come here. And now I think it's become so corporate and so mainstream that it's wide open and a great place for professional teams. So going to be fun, going to be interesting when it opens back up.
And since your retirement from actually fighting, are you still in the fight game, or did your entrepreneurial kick in, your entrepreneurial spirit kick in? And I know we're going to get into some of the acting gigs, which is unbelievable of the success you've had in Hollywood. But as far as the day-to-day in Vegas, are you still in the gym life? Are you owning your gym still? Are some of those still open?
Yeah, I'm still owning Xtreme Couture. I'm in the process of succeeding that to my son, Ryan. Obviously, Ryan's been fighting for about 10 years, mostly with Bellator fighting championships. And I think he's coming to the end of it. He isn't officially retired yet, but I noticed he got his septum put back in place, which is a pretty good indicator you're not really interested in getting punched in the grill anymore.
No, what a way to make a living.
I'm in the process of handing the gym over to him and let him kind of run with the brand and take over the gym operations. I'm very focused on acting, having fun, chasing those, learning more about behind the camera production and producing. And I think eventually I'm going to foray into trying to write some stories and things too, not just wait, for the phone to ring and hope to get another film, but take a little more proactive stance in the film industry, and that's been fun and interesting. We were just getting ready to start a film May 1st here called Dark Angels. It's kind of a action adventure a little sci-fi supernatural story. Excited to be able to produce that, and two, to be able to act in it as well. I think it's a really cool story. So hopefully Vegas opens up here. They're saying maybe the 1st of May, and we can get that back on track. We were right in the finishing throes of pre-production for the film, and originally scheduled to start shooting in May for a few weeks. So hopefully get that right back on track and get that done and in the can, and learn a little bit more about that industry. They're saying Expendables 4 will probably start up in the fall. So hopefully that stays on track. And we got a couple of other offers in the film business pending as well. Some TV stuff we're trying to put together and work on, but none of that's done yet. So until it's a signed deal and we know we're going to get it done, you got to kind of keep your mouth shut.
Hey, Randy, is in your life, were you ever intimidated ever? And what I mean by that is you win a high school wrestling state championship, and then you go straight into military, which is, then thank you for your service. And that's very honorable. You come out of there and you go to one of the top wrestling, Division I schools of all time, John Smith. And I don't know if you wrestled with John. I'm sure you probably did in that time frame, or was he a little bit before you?
John was the class before me.
Before you.
Competitive years. And then his first year as the head coach was my senior year in college.
Your senior year, you come out of there. I love the story. I want to know more about it. I've heard rumors about how the mistake was made in your paperwork when you were applying for the Olympic team. Is this true, or was it an Army team that you applied for wrestling and you wanted to go freestyle, but they accidentally put you into Greco?
Yeah, that's true. That happened at a tournament in Europe. I was stationed in Germany and had never really wrestled Greco before. I'd only wrestled free, honestly, a few times, so I hadn't wrestled that much more, but I'd never done Greco. And I joined the bracket for the style tournament. They mistakenly put me on the Greco tournament too, and started calling my name for a match. And I'm like, how am I on that? And I just finished this match. And they said, well, you're going to wrestle Greco or not? And I said, well, all right. I did it. And I ended up winning the tournament
and made the Olympic team.
Fell in love with that style. I don't know. I'm one of those guys. I started looking and researching the style, and we really only had 2 world champions and 1 Olympic champion in Greco from America. It's not a terribly popular style here. And so immediately I was like, okay, well, that's what I want to do then. I want to be the next guy to make a mark in that nobody else really seems to like. And led me to, my first world championship in the military world championships in 1988, an alternate on the 88 team as a soldier, which got the attention of a lot of college coaches. They're like, where'd this guy come from? Who the hell is he? Because I didn't go to college. I went right into the Army out of high school. So they found out I had 4 years of eligibility, and the phone started ringing. Lo and behold, I ended up at Oklahoma State, which was a great place for me. I think as much confidence as I'd gotten in my ability in the Army to compete on an international stage, I think it was at Oklahoma State, I learned that I could win at that level as well. So
you
all part of the journey.
You walk right into a powerhouse. You're a 3-time All-American. You're runner-up in the NCAAs twice. You come out of this career and you go right into a Hall of Fame mixed martial arts combat fighting career. Like literally just an unbelievable career when you go from heavyweight and light heavyweight back and forth sometimes, but you're little compared, like you're fighting guys that were way bigger than you at 205, 210 pounds. I don't know what you walk around at. Is it safe to say it's somewhere at 215 though? I mean, you're not a huge guy.
Sitting here at 215 right now.
215 and you're fighting guys that are
never fluctuated much. It stayed right around 220 most of my fighting career. So yeah, I had to think about it a little bit differently. Certainly 205 was pretty easy for me to make as far as cutting a little bit of weight. And then fighting the bigger guys, you had a little more about it. You didn't definitely want to go nose to nose and power for power with guys that size. You had to find ways around it, make them move, make them work harder than they really wanted to work or were forced to work before.
So you research Greco-Roman, you become good at it. You go into college and become have a great college career. You go into combat fighting and you research it, and you have to have a good strategy. You have to be an intelligent person to fight guys that are way bigger than you, strong. Like, you're a strong guy, but these guys are just as strong with a lot more body weight. So you have to figure this part of the game out. Then you leave this career and now you jump right into, it's not like you went down to the Las Vegas Municipal Theater and jumped in on the Christmas Story on an acting gig. You jump right in with Sylvester Stallone and Dolph Lundgren and like serious action heroes. I mean, we're talking Rocky and we're talking Lincoln Hawk and Over the Top and in Rocky IV, training in the snow in Russia, like some of the greatest scenes of Dolph Lundgren and Apollo Creed. I mean, like big time acting. So now you're saying you're researching acting. Were you ever intimidated in any of this, or were you just kind of like, F it, let's roll?
Well, I think, like I said, it's been a journey. I think like every kid walking on that junior high school mat in a gymnasium full of your peers wearing a singlet and tights. I mean, that takes courage. Forget winning or losing. That takes care of itself. But just walking out there was a challenge enough. And yeah, scared to death. But I think that's the thing the sport breeds, is that character. You learn to face those adversities, to go out and that's one of the things I love wrestling to this day. I think I'll always be that guy. I'll always look at the world through those eyes of a wrestler and apply that mindset to every problem that I face. That carried me through college. That carried me through fighting. And I think in a lot of ways that's fashioned me to go out and be successful in acting as well. Diligence, coachable, prepared, going to be the first one on set, ready to go, easy to work with. I think those are all things that bleed over from fighting and wrestling to acting, and that I think in the long run are going to help me out.
And it sounds to me like it's not just a hobby. It's not just, it's Randy Couture, we're going to have him as a special. He's going to be playing himself on like the King of Queens episode and Hendo and the stuff that you guys have done there. It's hilarious with Kevin James, but these are like acting gigs to where you're really like thinking about this as a screenwriter and a producer, and you might even finance a movie one day and find some money and become an executive producer. It looks to me like are maybe wanting to be on the Academy one day of an acceptance speech or something. Are those the goals?
I mean, I don't know if that's in the cards or not. But I've never been one of those guys that do things halfway. If I'm going to get involved and do it, I'm going to do it all the way and do it the best that I know how, and wherever that leads me. So, acting is certainly something outside the box for me. And I've spent my whole life as an athlete, from the time I was 6 years old playing soccer all the way through school, wrestling, football, baseball, every other sport you can think of. I tried it. And I think that, I don't know. I think that fashions you in a particular way. You approach the world in a particular way because of that. And I just think it's how you're wired.
So are you wired the way that when you see some of the antics that go on in today's mixed martial arts world, are you a believer in selling the fight, or are you more of a believer in let's settle it once they close that gate? Or is there something to be said about getting the pay-per-view eyeballs on it through throwing water bottles and pulling some of the antics that we're so used to seeing today?
I'm not a fan of that stuff, and was never my style. I think you want to let your fighting speak for itself. I think that's what people want to see. They want to see you compete, see how you compete. So I think that's what's most important. We started using this WWE model and rewarding these guys for their publicity stunts and their antics rather than, is important. And that's the competition and how you compete. And I think that's the difference. And I think you're seeing that passion in some of the other organizations. They're not rewarding those antics. If that's who you are and how you're wired, you have to do to go out and deal with the adversity of competition. That's one thing. But so many of these guys are doing it because it's being rewarded. They feel like it's to market themselves. Yeah, I think it's a distraction. I think it takes away from the athletics, from the sport itself. And just the whole thing. Most of it's fabricated, in my opinion. I think very rarely is there genuine animosity between two competitors, two combative sports athletes. I think most of it's hype. Most of it's they're trying to create heat, just like you said, to generate interest in a fight. How about you just be yourself and go out there and put it on the line and do what we do? If that should be exciting enough, in my opinion.
And I just don't see how anybody could ever argue that, because if you look at this last big heavyweight title fight in boxing, when you have these guys, Fury comes out against Wilder, and the walkouts literally took like 12 minutes a piece. And it was a whole, like, you probably were like, they had to have a choreographer. They had to have a script writer. They got to have stuntmen. The girls are faking carrying him on the chariot with the big King's Lair. I get it. But Tyson would walk out Rocky Marciano style with black boots and a little towel cut off over him. And he would just he'd win the fight before the bell went off 90% of the time. But Tyson's 19, 20 years old, knocking out grown men like they were nothing. And he never once had a rap video or a rap walkout, or it's just weird that what does the audience really need that? Or could these guys just walk out and let their talent speak for themselves? You and Hendo, and I know Matt Hughes had a little country, a little Hank Williams Jr. Country Boy Can Survive. You guys got your walkout songs, but today it's like, what are we really cheering on here? Are we voting on the best, choreographed entrance, or are we gonna brawl? Because some of these fights don't. The last fight with this Stylebender guy, and I like Stylebender, and I think he's tough, and I think that he's talented. I would never disrespect the fighter or take anything away from the fight game. But he comes out in a choreographed dance move, and then him and Romero, who's a world class, I think he's a bronze medalist in the Olympics in freestyle wrestling. They don't even throw a punch, and they don't even get a takedown.
Yeah. Well, Romero was an absolute stud in the freestyle wrestling. And I think he was a world champion for Cuba. I know I had an athlete from Oregon State that competed against him a lot and eventually beat him to win a world championship. But Yoel Romero is a very, very freestyle wrestler. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that's what it boils down to. They're trying to create more of a sensation than a sport already as exciting and thrilling as it gets, in my opinion. So, but again, I can't explain that other than they're just trying to use it as a marketing tool. I've been doing a lot of these Zoom, a veterans program. We're doing virtual meetings because we can't get in our gyms and do our usual workouts and our usual meetings. So we've been doing them all virtually for the last few weeks. And it's been pretty cool. So thankful for the ability to be able to connect that way.
Yeah.
We may physically distance, but we can socially stay connected, and real important, especially for our vets. They're not good at being isolated. So it's been, one of those things we've had to adapt and kind of overcome with all this quarantine stuff.
Well, we're talking about your fighting career, but when you bring up a great point of the way that somebody at your level in life can give back, and through our hunting brands, we've been able to take several veterans and warriors on hunts to get them back out in the field through whether it was Freedom Hunters, or we work with a group out of Tennessee called Special Ops Excursions that they concentrate and focus their efforts on getting active duty special forces members into the woods when they're in and out of duty. Like if they get a couple months off, we'll get them on a duck hunting trip or a fishing excursion. So we've been able to have these guys and girls in our duck blinds in the turkey woods with us and just see how therapeutic a duck hunt can be, or in your case, a workout can be, or a fight, maybe some sparring or rolling or, whatever it is. I think that is like one of my number one goals in life right now, is to really pay attention to the things that you could easily wake up in Reno, Nevada, and Tahoe right here and never think about it, because it's not like people are like sitting there saying, hey, take care of the veterans. And it's just like, it's a constant focus of mine to really shed light on that. And I know it is for you too, because veterans don't ask for it. They don't want it. They sometimes they don't even accept it a lot of the times, but once you get them out there and see how free it is and let their boots hit that soil in the duck blind or whatever, it's amazing to see what it does to their soul. So I appreciate and honor you for doing that.
I wore that uniform for 6 years, just trying to find a way to do my part and give back. I mean, since 9/11, we've got a lot of guys literally putting their asses on the line
for our country and our way of life. And they need to, they come back and strip that uniform away, and we just throw them back in society. They're going to assimilate like a normal human, and there's nothing normal about them. They're special individuals that can do that kind of training, do those sorts of things that nobody else wants to really do. And you strip that identity away and just throw them back. Got to help them find a new purpose, help them get those demons out and show them the light of day, so that they can find a way to process where they've been and what they've seen and done, and allow them to get through it. Post-traumatic stress happens to a lot of people in a lot of different situations. It doesn't become a disorder unless you stuff those feelings down there so long that they start getting in the way. You start dragging around a bunch of baggage that affects your relationships and everything else. So creating some places where these guys can let some of those things out with people that understand, that speak the same language, that have been there and done that too, has been very, very powerful.
And
so
one,
Emerging Vets and Players has been a lot of fun for the last 4 years to see grow and to be a part of. So
say the name again, Randy. Say the name again, please.
MVP, Emerging Vets and Players. So the website is vetsandplayers.org.
And if somebody wants to get involved, is it a volunteer basis? Is it a charitable donation? What is the main mission of MVP?
If you're a vet, we're in 5 cities right now across the country. We're in LA, Vegas, Chicago, Atlanta, and Manhattan, New York City. Find us on the website and go to one of our chapters. Go to a workout. If you're a vet or a retired ball player in any sport, our gyms are open to you. Come hang out. Come get reconnected with other folks that are just like you are. And if not, go to the site, look up our fundraising events and some of the other stuff we're doing if you want to contribute to create these places for these vets and these players to get together and stay healthy. Then get on board. Help us do that.
Yeah, I definitely want to get involved and help spread the love and spread the word on that. And I think that one of the things that I realized being around veterans, Randy Couture, is that you would think that a normal person, when they get out of that type of situation, would be happier. You know what I mean? But they're longing to get back there and be besides their brother. So if it's an injury that prevents them from going back, or, their time has come to an end, they have a really hard time disconnecting from where they think that they're supposed to be and where they're comfortable being. And I think that that's a big part of what we want to do, is make them feel like, hey, you're accepted here. This is what, you're welcome to train here, fight in this gym. You're welcome to be in this duck blind with us. And I think they just have a really hard time accepting the fact that they don't get to go over there and do what they feel that they were put on earth to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think their calling, that's their purpose. Serving is their purpose. That's who they are. And especially the longer they've done it, the harder it is to just strip that and walk that. I was in both of those uniforms. A soldier for 6 years and made the decision to get out and walk away from that decision for me. I was a professional athlete for 14 years. Making the decision that it was time to hang up those gloves and walk away from that was a big, difficult decision. It was not easy. I'm very fortunate in that I had a ready-made purpose already in line. My position, seemed seamless. It was still a big decision and difficult for me to do, but I was fortunate, and I had acting to fall back on, or I had going to Oklahoma State when I walked away from that military uniform. That's how I was supporting my family. Those were my friends, part of who I was. And so finding that new purpose, that new way forward to continue to do something that I'm passionate about. And that's what these guys need to find too while they're in transit. That's the key.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's very well said. And talking about you walking away from fighting and you saying how difficult it was, I think that there's proof in that I think that you won 4 title fights or 4 big time UFC fights after the age of 40. Is that correct?
I think it's something like that. I don't know all the stats, but I think I won my last title was against Tim Sylvia fight. And I think it was all when that fight happened. So I think it was the oldest heavyweight champion at that time. So I don't, stats are stats. I don't track them that much, to be honest. But
Sylvia had beaten like Arlovsky right before that, right? Didn't he take the title from Arlovsky? Wasn't that time where
Yeah, there was about 3 was Sylvia Arlovsky's show. You know, they were back and forth. I think they fought each other 3 or 4 times and beat each other back and forth for the title a couple of times. So yeah, Tim was at the and Andre top of the heap there in that division for a while, and that was a big opportunity to fight Tim. He was a great big guy, and he was a friend. He was somebody I like, and to this day we're still friends. And it's always interesting when you compete against someone that you care about. That's a friend of yours.
What was his talent? I know that he had a good reach. Did he have a wrestling background? Was he jiu-jitsu, or was he just all hands, or did he throw kicks? What was Tim's? How did he win? How did he beat Arlovsky or even be in the ring with Randy Couture? Because obviously the guy, I think he was a 2-time champion in the heavyweight division. I mean, he was a fighter. I mean, he's a UFC champion. That's saying enough right there. But he's so unassuming to me because I've met him at a bunch of hunting shows. Besides his size, you're like, man, he's a big man. But what was his fighting talent?
Yeah, I mean, Tim was a very good striker who learned enough in the other areas to keep fights standing or survive on the ground. You know, obviously, he lost to Mir on the ground. He got his arm broke in that one, but most of the time he demonstrated well-rounded skills and was able to stay where he needed to stay, which was in the standing position.
What's the mindset have to be, Randy Couture, when you know that you're going against, you know, the baddest people in the world? You're one of them. So they got to have a mindset too. You went up against the Chuck Liddells. You went up against Brock Lesnar. Like, that is Chuck Liddell's probably 185 to 200 pounds at the time, maybe 205. Were you fighting at 205 against Chuck Liddell?
Those were all 3 of those fights were at 205. Yeah.
And Lesnar's got to be 265 to 280, somewhere in there when you fight him.
290.
What is the mindset? How do you do that, or even persuade yourself to say, yeah, I'm going to go in there against Brock Lesnar, who is a good wrestler, right?
Yeah, very good wrestler.
NCAA champ.
Minnesota. Very, very good athlete, very good wrestler, and a great big guy. Yeah, he is a big guy. Every guy you face poses problems. It's problem solving. That's what it is. You got to train your mind and your body to figure out how the best way to solve the problem using the skills and tools that you have in your tool belt. That's fighting in a nutshell. Sometimes you get it right and it's a great night, and sometimes you get it wrong and it's not so much fun.
Is there any regrets in any of your regimens, your training, your dieting, your nutrition, your focus, or your mental stability, or your toughness, your mental toughness? You're already a wrestler, a world-class wrestler. So there's nothing that can intimidate. I keep going back to that word intimidation because I just see a lot of your matches to where you were so driven to where your specialty was takedowns, some ground and pound, tying up with a guy. But a lot of times you would stay on your feet and you would battle and scrap that way. You became like an all-around fighter. And as I watched your career, it seemed to me like you had to adapt to a lot of different styles at the time. And I didn't know that if you ever trained in boxing, did you train in jiu-jitsu? Like today you see guys that are black belt in this, and they go train with Freddie Roach down in LA, and the gyms are so much more technologically advanced today, it seems like, and they got a coach for every different sector of this MMA. And to me, you just seem like this all-American badass wrestler that was going in there and just straight scrapping.
Well, I definitely tried to take this, be a student of the game. I recognize that as strong as my wrestling background was, and that was a great foundation for me, I had to go out and learn these other things. I had to start boxing and kickboxing and training in Muay Thai. Those were my 3 favorite styles, and where I spent the most time, because I knew if I could use my wrestling effectively, strike with enough to get my hands on him, I could make him wrestle me, and that put me in a good position to win. I definitely had to study jiu-jitsu, and eventually ended up getting a black belt in jiu-jitsu under Neil Melanson. It took me 14 years, but I had to understand the problem these guys were posing, what they were doing, and how they were, that kind of least resistance that jiu-jitsu was or is. I had to kind of figure that out and kind of unlock or play around with the Rubik's Cube, right, to find the right position. And each guy poses different areas of strengths and weakness. You have to sharpen specific tools to go out and face each, and that varied from. So it's definitely right. A thinking man's game. It's not endless physical activity. You definitely need to be cerebral, and most that we know in mixed martial arts, their opportunity to be a professional athlete in our society, which is certainly a big thing. So it's something I took very seriously, and just about brutality. It was about, technique, tactics, having the right mind in perspective, not being afraid to go out and fail. I have an 11 as a fighter, and loss is more important. That was my guide. I needed to make some changes. I need to really analyze my skill sets, mistakes, and what I could do better, and kept me on the path to getting better and improving all the time.
Are you happy with, and I know that you can't turn back time, and I know that you can't pick where you're at in a timeline because of, that's life, but you were in that golden era of MMA, of what I consider like the trailblazing era. And I know that the Gracies, and they brought jiu-jitsu here from Brazil. And I know that MMA had been around 93, 94 UFC starts, but I really feel like maybe that's a little early. Maybe it was 99, maybe it's 98, 99. You can correct me if I'm wrong. 93.
93. Yep.
93. So, but in that 2001, 2003, 2005, 2008 time range is when you and the Liddells and is that when it really took off? Is that when Forrest and Bonner fight? Or is that kind of the golden age of MMA in your opinion? Or would you rather be fighting today with the chance of the bigger contracts or the bigger payday, the bigger pay-per-views? At UFC, it seems like there's a fight every night, at least 3 times a week, it seems, before the quarantine. But do you wish that you were fighting in a different time, or are you happy with when you came up?
No, I'm happy with where I came in. I think I came in right on the transition of that first generation of fighters that were out to prove that their style was the best style. And I think we realized very quickly that there was no one style that encompassed everything you needed to know. And so part of that second phase of fighters that cross-trained, learned all this other stuff, tried to become a well-rounded, complete fighter. And now I think we're in a third generation of fighters that watched us, saw us competing, and said, that's what I want to do. They weren't worried about a belt or anything. Just wanted to be a mixed martial artist and a well-rounded fighter. In a lot of amazing guys, in cages in different promotions across the world right now because of that. I don't, I'm happy with the era that I got to fight in. I'm happy with seeing the sport evolve the way it has to the level that it's at now. And I don't think there's any of that I would change. I wouldn't go back and change any of the fights. Like I said, those losses are almost more important to me than the wins. I never went back and watched the fights I won. Why? Got the outcome I wanted. You'd be damn sure I watched every single one I lost multiple times, trying to figure out what I could do better, how I could improve, where to move forward from there, pick myself back up and get back out there and try and find again. That in my opinion is what's important in our sport.
Wow, that's a very good way to look at it. And I think that you said something there that's so important to the greatest athletes in their respective areas in sports is not being afraid to fail and learning from failure and using it as something that you advance yourself. Because a lot of times I look at fighting like this, Randy Couture, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that fighting is a legacy game, and I think it's a respect deal to where your career is built on the way that you treat the sport and respect the sport, but it also reflects your win-loss reflects it, and the way that you hold, your championship fights and your belts that you've won. I think that fighting isn't done on going out and saying, all right, I came into the sport, I made a lot of money, and I got a lot of endorsement deals, and I'm fine with my career. And it's cool that if you're like that, but in the fight game, I look at it as something that the legacy of the fighter is everything. And I don't think it's built on the smack talk or the amount of pay-per-views or the money part and I know that you had a successful career financially. I just look at fighting as if you can't look back on it and go, that's my stamp, that's my legacy, I'm happy with that, then that's really not the fight game. I don't think that some of the antics that we started this conversation with are what the fight game's all about. And I think that the maturity level of a fighter later on in their career, hopefully, is understanding that nobody, whether you're Mayweather Jr., whether you're Tyson Ali, Conor McGregor, Randy Couture, you're not bigger than the fight game. And the legacy is the respect of that game and your opponent. And I just think that a lot of these guys today are in it. They think that quick money is going to satisfy them. And I think they soon realize that that's not what it's about. Even Conor has had to come back, shake himself, and reapply himself as like, look, I want to go out as a fighter. I've made money, but I can't leave my career. That guy could retire right now and never fight again. But I think something inside of him tells me, look, I'm not respected by other fighters. Randy Couture is very well respected by other fighters. Dan Hendo Henderson is very well respected by other fighters. These guys that pull that shit, I think, come back and go, you know what? I got to go back and I have to reinvent myself and show that I am respectful of my opponents and I hold the fight game at the ultimate level. And I think that a lot of that gets away from people with the big endorsement deals and the big paychecks. It's not about the money in fighting. You can see it in Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was worth $300 million at 22 years old and lost it all. But he still, when he goes into a room of boxing fans, gets a standing ovation because of the stamp he left, even with the embarrassments of the Holyfield ear and the Lennox Lewis fights and the stuff that he shouldn't have even been in the ring then. He wasn't even known for that, in my opinion. I don't know if I'm making sense, but the legacy of a fighter is more important than all of that, the paycheck and the big ritzy red carpet limousine life.
Yeah, I think there's some truth in that for sure. And I think, you boil it down to what's important. Important is pursuing your with everything that you have, everything that you are. And that's what fighting is. It's a tough way to make a living. Anybody that tells you it's easy is crazy. It's not easy. There's a lot that goes into it. It's very physical. It's very demanding. And you have to be a student of the game if you want to be successful. That's why there's small percentage of the people in the population that reach that level, 2-3% of a sport like MMA, because it takes a lot. It's very, very difficult. So you better be passionate about it. It better be something you really love and really want to do if you're going to go down that road.
Yeah, and I think I was just trying to say, Randy, is that it just seems to me like as a fighter, you'd want to look back on your career and go, you know what? I was respected by the other fighters. Or do you look at it and go, I did what it took to make a living? I don't know if you can do that in the fight game. That is all I'm saying, is that I just think it's one of those career paths that you cannot disrespect the game, because the fight game is everything, and it's a very small fraction that makes it. And you just can't build a fighting career on personality and attitude. I don't think. I think you got to be able to back it up. And I think that you have to learn that respect game no matter where it is in your career, or I think you'll be forgotten. I really do. I don't think that you want to be forgotten by other fighters.
Well, I just hope that that's something that changes in our sport, the camaraderie and respect between the athletes. That's what martial arts is all about. And I think so many of these other antics and publicity stunts and stuff detract from that respect of what the sport and the character that the sport fosters, that it brings out in people. And it gets lost in some of that craziness. So I agree with what you're saying.
So when you walk into a reunion or you walk onto a movie set, because I know like a guy like Liddell has been in some movies. I know Uriah Faber had a movie come out this week. I don't know if you've talked to Uriah, but he just put out a new movie on the hemp or the marijuana of Northern California industry. That just came out on last Friday. When you see a guy like Chuck Liddell, when you had 3 big time memorable bouts with him, you lost 2 of those, if I'm correct, right?
Right.
Is there any animosity at all, or is it 100% respect and love for each other?
Chuck and I are friends. Tito and I are friends. I'm friends with Tim Sylvia. I mean, I can't think of a single guy, honestly, that I fought of the 30 fights that I had that I don't get along with, and that I couldn't text or call up and say, yo, man, what's going on? How are you? What are you up to? Or, it was never about animosity or any of those things. I think that if you're going into a fight with that, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to be rash, and you're going to put yourself in harm's way. You're going to make mistakes. So I think it's a very calculated, calm, very specific mindset. That's what fighters are. That's what we do. It's not a fight. I think that's a lot of fans have trouble putting themselves in our shoes and walking those 4 steps up into the cage and the mindset and what it takes to do that. They relate to that altercation or that street fight where somebody was pushing them, being obnoxious, insulting or physically harassing you to the point where you lose it and you got to take care of business. That's not what MMA and prize fighting, real fighting is all about. It is very calculated, very tactical and technical. And if you go in any other place and you allow your emotions, a mad athlete is a bad athlete, in my opinion. You got to stay centered and focused and do exactly what you're trained to do to be successful.
And is this how you were brought up from your earliest days of wrestling and athletics? Were you a student of the game, like you became a student of different things in your life, including acting, including Greco-Roman? Were you always breaking it down and figure out how to have the upper level? Were you always fighting up? Did you always wrestle up with your size? Were you a smaller guy growing up and you always had to figure out a way?
I did wrestle up a few times in my high school career. Wrestled up a couple times up for the national team here and there as well. Really kind of got into being a real student of the game, trying to break into the upper echelon and the national team and the international stage, trying to win a world championship. That's where you had to really start studying opponents, where they were strong, where they get scored fights or matches, how did they lose matches, and take film, study film. Same in college. There was that same mentality. That was something that wrestling fostered in me that translated over to fighting. I don't think a lot of fighters, I think more fighters approach the sport that way now. But when I started, I don't think very many fighters thought of it that way or that way. I think I had the benefit of having all that wrestling background, being on collegiate programs and national team programs where that was a huge. You had to study. You had to know, what you had to watch out for, but just be aware of those things, train those things. That was a big part of wrestling at both the college level and national circuit.
I totally understand. And what about the business side of Randy Couture? You're a businessman, during your fighting career and after. You've had clothing lines, you've had gyms, you have an acting business, you have an acting career. What is your opinion as an athlete and as a businessman of the sponsorship parallel in MMA, where like a Bellator, you can go out and do what you used to do, where like Matt Hughes or you guys, like Matt would have hunting companies on his shorts, and ammunition, and now it's all Reebok. And then you would throw your banner over you'd have your banner over the ring of the octagon, and you'd see Randy Couture's Fight Camp is sponsored by all of these guys. As an athlete, you're getting money in, plus you're getting paid by the league. As a businessman, did you understand Dana White and the Fertittas, or were you one-sided like that? That should not be taken out of the fighter's hands, or can you even talk on that?
Well, I thought that was a travesty to the fighters for sure, especially those mid and lower tier fighters that were making almost as much from their sponsorships as they were from their purses. The promoter wasn't paying those guys that well, so they could go out and generate just as much income from that exposure they were giving a potential sponsor. So that was something that I think greedily, in my opinion, the company took away from the athletes. They signed a $70 million deal with Reebok. Supposedly, the athletes were going to get remunerated for their kits at each show, but those numbers never washed out. Especially, the upper echelon fighters, the top 3 to 5% of the people that were getting percentages of pay-per-view and getting the bigger purses, those were relationships that we enjoyed. Some of my friends were the ones that wanted to sponsor me, wanted that exposure. But as far as my purse or the amount I was making off that fight, it was less significant. Those mid and lower tier fighters, that's significant amount of money for them. They're making 10 and 10, 10,000 to show, 10,000 to win. They get another $20,000 worth of sponsorships if they're in a TV fight, or that's based on their butt, or that's based on their banner. That's a lot of money to a guy like that that's only going to maybe get to fight 2 or 3 times in a year to make those numbers add up, to make fighting worthwhile. Honestly, you still got a family to support, you still got bills to pay, you still got to live. So there's a delicate balance there. And in my opinion, I think that the Reebok deal hurt the UFC, hurt their brand. I think the fans were disenchanted by that treated the fighters. And I think a lot of the fighters were disenchanted as well. And you saw a lot of guys take their option for free agency and go to another organization when that stuff came down.
Yeah, I that's exactly what I was thinking that you would say, not verbatim, but it seems to me like if you're potentially going to sell a business for $4.2 billion or however much money they ended up selling the league for 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, whatever that was, I just don't think that $70 million really meant shit in the long run, where they could have let the athletes continue on that path. But I guess that the UFC is like, if you're not paying us directly, then you're not going to have your name on anything within the bounds of us filling these seats, when a lot of the times those fighters were the ones filling that seat. And yes, the UFC was giving you guys a platform to fight on, but you guys were the ones that were honing your skills and getting to the point to get the fans that impressed with wanting to come out and support you. So you should be able to go out and work with the companies that you want, in my opinion. And I'm trying to look at it from the entrepreneurial side of like, why did the Fertittas and Dana White really need that Reebok money? One, the uniforms are not that good looking, and I'm just being like aestheticals right there, but they're just not that cool looking in a lot of the instances that you see. Myself as a UFC fan, I have probably 15 to 20 tap out fight shirts from the early days of your career and Liddell's and Ryan Bader's and some other guys that I've met, or different affliction shirts that you had, or your natural couture shirts and stuff like that. Never once have I bought a Reebok kit or even thought about buying one for my nephew or anybody. So I don't really know how many they're actually selling. I've never seen one being worn in any public forum I've been at.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I see, obviously in the gym, I see a bunch of guys carrying the Reebok bags and wearing the Reebok shirts or training in their kits and their gear, but I've never seen any of the fans wearing them.
No.
Yeah. And I know, I was part and parcel of that whole thing. We were a big sponsor. Xtreme Couture and Affliction clothing companies were both huge sponsors of athletes. I think we had 30 athletes on our books one time that we were sponsoring, and all of that went away. Reebok deal. But even when we were able to sponsor athletes, the UFC was still making us pay $100,000 fee for the year to be an official sponsor, to be able to sponsor athletes that fought on those cards.
Oh, they were making money then.
Oh yeah, they were going to get their money one way or the other. And obviously signing the Reebok deal and the uniforms was a big money deal for them as a company. And that's all. And at the end of the day, it's a business, and that's all that really matters to them is their bottom line.
Yeah, but again, when you're talking about fighters, they have this. I guess they could always have the stance of, where are you going to go? You're saying that once this contract was signed, that if you wanted to go out and get a publishing deal on a book about your life, or they wanted you to be on the cover of a video game, you would have had to go through the UFC, and they would have made us. Is that kind of like the Vince McMahon model, to where if Hulk Hogan wanted to go make a movie?
That's exactly what it is. It's the exact same model that the UFC and Dana's using. They want to tie up your ancillary rights in perpetuity, forever, not just while you're fighting, but forever under that contract. It was a pretty lousy contract, and I was one of the only fighters who first and kind of realized what an ancillary right was and try to fight for those. I had clothing and some other categories, that I wanted to take. I reckon I was building a brand as a fighter, and that was in other ways going to be able to, when I wasn't able to fight anymore, make me be able to have a way to make a living off of that brand that I was building. And yes, graciously, they provided a platform for me to ply my wares, to go out and fight and compete. And for that, I was certainly appreciative. But at the same time, I didn't want to sign everything over to them and just let them own me from top to bottom. It just didn't seem right. So
are you allowed to use the name Natural right now?
Yeah, it's mine.
So
I didn't give myself that nickname, but it was the nickname that, that or Captain America associated to me or with me through fighting. But it's not licensed by anybody else. So I don't use it. People call me that. I never really, it wasn't my thing. It was their thing.
So a guy like The Rock, that name was probably given to him through the WWE and then became the WWF or whatever back. Does he have to go to Vince McMahon and say, can I still use that name as an actor? Or does he just go by Dwayne now? Do you know The Rock? Do you run with him at all?
I've met him. I don't run with him, but I've met him a few times. Been on a few episodes of Ballers. I wasn't in specific scenes with him, but that's a big show for him. I've met him at fights. I think he goes by Dwayne Johnson. I think, the Rock still gets thrown around there. That's how people recognize him, certainly his fan base. I'm not really sure what his contract looks like with Vince McMahon and what he had to ask permission for or not. Certainly his success has been good for the WWE and Vince and everything that they're doing. So, one hand washes the other, but I definitely know that they use the same exact model, controlling all those ancillary rights and all of that stuff.
Speaking of WWE and that type of wrestling, Randy, have you watched the documentary on Netflix called Beyond the Mat?
Beyond the Mat.
It's a documentary film to where this guy goes around and he wants to meet a certain number of wrestlers that he kind of grew up watching. So those include Jake the Snake Roberts. This might start with Terry Funk, Jake the Snake, and anyway, at the very end, it's I want to make sure that I have all of this right, but it's the guy that has all the different personalities like Mankind and wears a mask in one of his personalities. And he's another name. He's got like 3 of them. I don't know if you know anything about that part of wrestling, but I thought it was really interesting to where he's in WrestleMania fighting The Rock for the title. And it goes through the entire discussion of what they do to set this fight up. And like, I'm going to do this, and then you're going to grab me here. Then you're going to run up the stairs and you're going to try to lure me up there. Then you're going to hit me and knock me off, and I'm going to fall on the table. And I was just like, man, this like is unbelievable. It's like and we all know what big time wrestling is, and I get it, but these guys are truly like acting and giving these fans like this show. And the thing that I brought out of it was like, I mean, these guys are going to the hospital and they are beat up. The injuries were not fake. I mean, they were getting the heck beat out of them, man.
Yeah, it's a physical activity for sure. Yeah, maybe choreographed and have predetermined outcomes, but these guys are athletic as anybody, and it's very physical. They get beat up. They do. And the difference is they're going to compete again in a few days. Every city, there's no sitting out. The show must go on. So, I mean, they end up taking pain pills and a lot of other things so that they can continue to perform week in, week out, night in, night out. And that's hard on the body.
Yeah, it's just if you get a chance to watch it, and they got to Jake the Snake that when I was watching WWE growing up, he was the one that would bring the bag in and he would have the boa, the python in there, and he would pin his guy and then he'd put the snake on him. Man, it goes through his departure from McMahon and then all these little tiny deals that he got in tiny towns across America and his heroin addiction. And it like literally like shows the loneliness of going from 50,000 roaring fans to a lonely Ramada Inn hotel bed. And he's like, that's when reality would sit in, is like, he literally he was on top of the world. And then he just felt like as lonely as you could possibly be. And I travel a lot and I'm on the road a lot, and I cherish my lifestyle, but it gets lonely. It gets hard to be away from your family, away from your roots. And you're always, away. You were away training, or I might be on a 1 month run. Or could you imagine being in the military like you were at one time when you're doing deployments of 6, 9, 18 months at a time? And I just think that, I often think about that word loneliness, and I think it's healthy in some ways, but I also think that like when you get to that stardom of where you got in your fight game and where Jake the Snake got in his wrestling career, it's almost like, can you adapt? Is there PTSD from that to where you go from being Randy Couture and you're fighting in front of all of these raving fans, and you try to go into Nobu at the Hard Rock, and I've been there with Hendo to where it's literally like Jesus parting the water. It's like, Hendo, selfie, Hendo, sign this napkin. And I'm like, dude, he's been retired for 5 years and he's still this famous, and I know you are too. And then do you go back to your room and reality sits in of like, man, the fight game's over? Or were you always mentally stable to handle that part of it? I know you said it was difficult, but it seems like that seems to me, and I'll finish by saying this. I've seen fighters, including Jake the Snake in this documentary, and Terry Funk, and him coming back into retirement when his doctor literally tells him on camera, you should never, ever fight again. Your knees are completely gone. You're going to hurt yourself really bad. And guys that have come back and fought into their 40s like you did. But there are also those fighters, like in my opinion, I think that Matt Hughes is a different story than what is out there. I don't know that for sure, but I think that depression sits in with some of these fighters when that red carpet and that screaming crowd is gone. And now you have to adapt, like that soldier coming back, and I'm nowhere near putting it on the same level, but they have to adapt in society again. And now the red carpet's been pulled out from under you. You're not on private jets anymore. You're not signing autographs as much as you were. Your payday aren't there. Your endorsement deals might be falling off, and you have to go back to that hotel room and be like, what the heck, man? I was just Randy the Natural Couture, and now I'm just Randy Couture trying to make, and I'm not saying this to you specifically. I've seen a lot of fighters. Let me rephrase that. I've seen quite a few fighters that I feel opinionated that say that they've been affected by going from the VIP to now it's just back to regular life.
Well, I think that's part of that transition, that the same struggle that our soldiers struggle with, strip away huge pieces of their identity, infrastructure, the guys they're used to having as support systems, all the things that they are. And the same thing with a professional athlete. That's the biggest thing most of those ball players miss is that locker room, that camaraderie. Those are the guys you can bitch to when things are going bad, and those are the guys that are going to slap you on the back when things are going great. That's what you miss. Yes, there's an adrenaline rush to being in combat. There's an adrenaline rush to competing, walking out of that tunnel on the football field or walking up those 4 steps into the cage. And that's something we as humans have to figure out and put in perspective. But finding that new purpose, that new thing that you're passionate about, where you feel like you're being of service, you're doing something worthwhile, maybe you're helping others or giving back to others, those things fill you up and make you feel okay. You know, they give you that new thing to look forward to when you can't do those things we used to do. You can't get up in that cage and fight anymore. You can't walk out on that football field and play the game anymore at the level you were used to. At the end of the day, you know, that make you broken. I think so many people want to assume that we're broken because of that, because that depression comes or whatever, you struggle with that transition. We try to change that narrative. That doesn't make you broken. You're still the same special person that you always were. What's behind those that rib cage is what matters. That's what made you special. That's what made you able to suck it up, do the things that nobody else was able to do, and be able to be in a position to walk out on that field, on that battlefield, or in that cage in the first place. So embrace that. Embrace your scars. Embrace all those things. They make you that special person. That doesn't make you broken. And then find that new purpose, that new thing that you can focus all that energy and that mindset on that's going to fulfill you, to make you feel comfortable, like you're contributing again and that you're part of something. Those are important things.
Randy, when we talked about the time that you came in that transition from the first generation of MMA and you were in that new role, every time I think about it, when I see some of these reruns on TV or like a Instagram clip of a fight, I'm like, shit, that was just 7 years ago. And then it says 2005. And I'm like, what? Do you ever get that feeling? Like, where did this time? Obviously we do. Like, time. My dad always would tell me before he passed on, he's like, dude, trust me, you're going to be here someday. Time flies. And now I'm 45 years old and I'm sitting here going like, I was just watching Randy Couture fight Chuck Liddell like 7 years ago. And that shit was like 15 years ago, like and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like I've been a UFC MMA fan for a lot longer than I thought I have been, you know, like I've been watching it for that long. And I'm like, there's no way. So what you just said about making that transition from retirement and finding something new to put your energy into, being an aging athlete, which I'm with a trainer named Matt Pendola, and his course with me is called the Aging Athlete, to keep the same values and the same consistency and chemistry and substance behind that rib cage that you did when you were competing, but trying to find a new avenue to put your focus into and to be a contributor. So being an aging athlete, we all get there. Now, you got the Mike Trouts and you got the Connors that are kind of in their prime, but they're going to be here someday too. And the time, that hand never stops. It never quits ticking. So how do you adapt to that, Randy, of being the natural Captain America, 6-pack abs, 8-pack abs, tanned up, fight in shape, and you still are. You obviously always still look great, but does it ever mess with you mentally of, man, time is flying. If I look back on my fighting career, it seems like yesterday is the next next 15 years going to fly by that fast? And you know what I'm saying? It's like, that's the shit I think about at this age.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to slow down and enjoy the journey at some point. We get so result oriented. We set those goals way out there and we're so focused on getting there. And then sometimes we forget to look at where we're at right now and enjoy the small steps and enjoy the journey. That's the fun part. It's not just achieving that thing or getting to that destination. It was the path that you took to get there and all the things you had to do to get there that you will remember and look back on fondly. And I think we forget that sometimes. We need to, let go of that destination and focus on the journey now and the things we're learning and doing now. And that's not always an easy thing to do.
Does it ever mess with your mind of like wanting to still go out and test yourself? Are you still the guy that will still go do, let's say, an interval training of 180 beats a second on the heart rate monitor and then come down to 130 and then kick it back up? Or do you get on the Versa Climber and still say, shit, man, I still got it. I'm Captain America. I'm freaking the natural. I can roll with anybody. Do you ever get down on the ground and roll? Because like I'll go into Hendo's gym in Temecula and he'll get down, but he's definitely not moving at Hendo speed, but he still gets in there a little bit. Do you still find yourself wanting to make sure that the world knows how much of a badass you truly were?
I don't know if I care about what the world thinks about it. I do it because it makes me feel good. I like sweating. And now I'm in a position where when I do those things and get on the mat with somebody or spar with somebody or roll with somebody, you get to share a wealth of knowledge. I've been doing this since I was 10 years old. In combative sports. I started wrestling at 10, 56 now. There's a wealth of experience there. I've probably forgotten more about wrestling than a lot of guys actually know. So getting on the mat, sparring, light sparring, and rolling with clients or guys that are fighting out of my gym is a chance for me to pass that knowledge on, give that stuff back to others that can take those tools and continue to use them in their career and in their journey. That's fun for me. Not only does it feel good and do I feel good because I got to sweat in and got to work out, but now I feel like I've also imparted some knowledge on somebody that's worthy of that, that's going to take that and do something with it.
And also you can't forget the fact that you're a leading man now. So you have to be aesthetically pleasing to the eye, right? I mean, you're a heartthrob actor now at this stage in your life, right?
I might be the only leading man with these cauliflower ears.
I don't ever know how to approach a guy. Like I can go to Hando and like flick him, and he'll grab me, and like our friendship has gotten there really fast through hunting and being around each other. But a lot of people still would go up to somebody with cauliflower ears and do what I just said, do you ever do? And they'll be like, I'm just going to test it. It's kind of like Johnny Knoxville. Like he would get into the bull shoot with a bucking bull from the PBR and just say, oh, I'm just going to take one to the rib cage, right? No, that's stupid. You don't go up to a freaking guy with those ears and even all you do is buy him a drink and get to know him, like it's almost becomes like testing ground. Do you ever get tested? Did you get tested because of who you were or because of the cauliflower ears?
No, not seriously. Nobody ever, you get the offhanded comment, and I'm sure Hendo gets it too. Oh man, I thought you'd be bigger. You look bigger on TV. I'm like, well, yeah, change your perspective when I'm sitting on your chest looking down at you and laugh. And they don't know what you said and they're not sure. And, just laugh it off. You got nothing to prove. And nobody's ever taken it that far or where they wanted to push it that far. I think, most of us are friendly guys. We don't have a chip on our shoulder. We don't have anything to prove. We've been there. We've done that. We've already proved it. So, and you're right. Most of the time when those sort of things happen, there's alcohol involved.
I can't imagine myself. Like that's one thing I have known for a long time is not to mess with cauliflower ears ever. Like you just don't do it. A wrestler that has hands is the baddest ass fighter in the world. I don't care how you could be a Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and I got tons of mad respect for that and how long it takes to get there. But a wrestler that can take you down and defend a takedown and has hands to ground and pound, you can't mess with them. They're me coming up. That is what I always wanted to do. And that I was going to go into this next is today on the podcast, I had David Taylor, who is my favorite wrestler to watch.
Great. Yeah.
like he's like the offensive machine. He's just coming back from an injury, one that, you know, he's qualified for the Olympic team again. And I was talking to him and I was looking at him like, you don't look that tough. You just don't. He's like, he's sitting there talking about how he adopts cats with his wife now. And he's like petting this little kitty, like Mr. Bigglesworth, you know? And I'm like, this is David freaking Taylor. Like you're in, and I'm just like, look how non-assuming the baddest ass dudes in the world. Like I wouldn't mess with him or Jordan Burroughs if my life depended on it, with the way that they can score at will. And I'm just like, dude, this guy is just the sweetest little unassuming cat loving, cat petting, cat adopting thing there is. And I told him, you know, Randy Couture is going to be on. And he's like, oh man, Randy Couture. And you know, he's like, and I told you about my ammo sponsor the other day, Brian Kelvington with Federal Premium Ammo. He's like, look at this thing. He just retired from NCAA reffing in D1 and D2. And he sent me that picture of you and when you were coaching up at Oregon State. And so that started a whole conversation between him and I about your career and about wrestling and about John Smith and Oklahoma State and your career there. And he knows a lot more about wrestling than I do. So I've kind of like got this mindset now through my platforms of hunting and this network that this podcast is called This Life Ain't For Everybody. I always built it on my life's not special. I'm not saying that waking up early in the morning and shooting ducks isn't for everybody. I'm saying that Randy Couture's life is different than the janitor at the high school. But if that janitor's got his whistle going and his broom going and he's whistling Dixie while he's sweeping the floors and making our schools a better place to be educated at, then he deserves all of the, you know, he deserves respect for taking that job serious and kicking butt at it. And so this whole podcast series was wrapped around all these different walks of life that I've been humbled and fortunate enough to come across. I got to meet Hendo because I was friends with a Major League Baseball player named Ryan Klesko. Well, I got to meet that major leaguer because of his association with the hunting industry. And it opened up all of these doors. And now the next thing I know, I'm on a Zoom podcast with one of my other MMA heroes in Randy Couture. And it's, so now I want to freaking like, I want to get wrestling out there even more than it is, because like Boise State lost their program and there was threats of USA Wrestling, you know, being out of the Olympics. And when I watch Beat the Streets or I watch the NCAAs, or if I even watch the Big Ten championships, like I'm glued. Like wrestling is so awesome for the fabric of America. And I just think that message that you give and that so many wrestlers can give, and the leadership and the substance that they obtain through that upbringing, I think it's really important. And there's a lot of communities that don't even have a wrestling club or a wrestling mat. We did an episode 2 years ago in Missouri Valley in Iowa. And a farm kid, he was a stud. He was favored to win the state championship, gets killed in a head-on collision on a farming road, 17 years old going into his senior year. So we go and we say, all right, what can we do as hunters? The duck hunting in that area is really good. We film there, but what can we do to get wrestling on a national TV show and to show how we can take what we've got, our ability to do, and give back to not just this family, but to that high school. So we go into the gym. I have Brent Metcalf, who's the assistant coach at Iowa State. And I have, I had one more wrestler with me. One of the studs from Iowa. I can't even think of his name. He's going to kill me now. They're in the wrestling room giving a seminar to these kids, and the kids are just like, oh my God, dude, these guys are it. This is Iowa, like the home of college wrestling, right? Of a wrestling upbringing, it seems. And we wanted to raise $1,300 for new singlets. We raised $12,900 and bought them a new mat, all these new singlets. And not all of this was on the show, but we wanted to give back. And through what Brett Metcalf and these wrestlers did for that school and this dinner we put on, the kids were selling tickets to it. They had a chance to win a Benelli and a side-by-side and all this stuff that we put together through our hunting partners. And we gave back to this wrestling community in Iowa. And it felt like, man, this is awesome. So that kind of got me thinking like, man, I want to talk with all these wrestlers and keep getting the word out there of how strong and the substance of what wrestling teaches a person. I didn't wrestle. I thought I could. I was an asthmatic. That's my excuse, Randy. I had asthma and I would be out of breath too fast. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, I want to talk to more wrestlers because it's just the best freaking substance there is. And everything that it teaches you, from leadership skills to perseverance to tenacity, I just don't know what else you need in life than the background you learned from a solid wrestling upbringing or a solid program.
Yeah, I agree. There's no better character. There's no sport on the planet, in my opinion, that develops character the way that sport does. You're going to learn how to win. You're going to learn how to lose. You're going to recognize that you're getting out of it exactly what you put into it along the way. You want to be lazy and not do the work, it's going to show up. And guess what? It's going to show up while you're out there by yourself on that mat, competing and struggling against another human being. That's not the time. I mean, you're never more vulnerable than you are when you walk out in the center of that mat or up those 4 stairs and into that cage. And that builder, I don't care who you are.
I just don't think that you can develop a better, I don't know. I don't know how you can't succeed in life with that type of an upbringing, because it's like a very strict and very regulated and just total focus. And everyone that I get to talk to, they have this, it seems like they're cut from the same cloth, even though I know they're not, but just their values and their ethics and everything that they preach, or they not preach, that's not a good word to use, but everything that they talk and believe in, it seems like you all went to the same exact coach and the same exact school and the same exact, whether it was the TOCs and the Tournament of Champions in Reno, or a John Smith or a Dan Severn camp at ASU, wherever it was, it just seems like it's the same message that gets brought out of all of these wrestling rooms.
Yeah, we were all forged in the same fire, same heat. There's no way around it. If you're going to be on a road and learn this sport, you're going to have to learn by the numbers. You're going to look at the world in a very particular way. You're going to learn the physiology, the mechanics, the body, the coordination, and then you're going to put yourself in the most vulnerable spot. Put yourself as a human, and sometimes succeed, and sometimes you're going to fail at that. And if that's not life, I don't know what is.
I don't know either.
That's why the sport is so amazing, and that's why it's man's oldest and greatest sport. I think because of that.
So who do you have on your dial right now? Do you still pay attention to the college rankings? Do you pay attention to the worlds, the Olympic trials? Are you paying attention to Kyle Snyder and Jaden Cox and all of these guys right now? I mean, we got some studs going for America right now, right?
We have an amazing team right now. We have an amazing set of rules. I think they finally recognized to separate Greco and freestyle a little bit. Since bubble to be removed from the Olympic program a few years back, I think it shed a lot of light on the sport of wrestling. It forced us to make some changes and clean some house, if you will, to make the sport a little more exciting, a little more fan friendly. And we have the athletes now to demonstrate what this sport really is all about on the world stage. So we're being put on the bubble like that was probably the best thing that's ever happened to wrestling, in my opinion. We had to fight for it a little bit. It wasn't just a given that we're going to be the Olympic sport. And we were one of the original Olympic sports. So to have that taken off the docket because the folks that were organizing and running international wrestling weren't paying attention, they weren't listening to the IOC, was a big thing. So I think cleaning it up, getting the rules the way they are now, making it fan-friendly and fun and understandable, and having a team like we have right now has been very, very important. We have some work to do in Greco. We need to recruit a little better, get some of these kids on the Greco program a little younger, so that by the time they get to the senior division or the open division, they're not getting their butts whooped, because the tactical style of both Greco and freestyle are so different. When freestyle is more akin to our collegiate wrestling, and so guys gravitate towards that. They want to make that Olympic team. Like all those guys you just mentioned, those young kids right now are watching them win medals. And it's like, I want to be like that guy. We're not winning those medals at the Greco level because we're not attracting those young kids. It's not a terribly popular style in the States. Again, one of the reasons why when I got exposed to it in the Army, I wanted to do it. I wanted to excel at it. I want to do things that nobody else had done yet, or not many people had done yet. So I think getting these younger kids on board, showing them they can go out and win world championships in Greco, they can achieve and make all those goals come true and those dreams come true too, is real important. And I think that's something we need to do in the Greco side of the house. But on the freestyle side of the house, we've got the best team I've seen in a long, long time.
Killer to watch. What are you doing as Randy Couture right now for a face or an ambassador of Greco-Roman? Is there things on the map? Did I hear a rumor, or am I digging into something or did I hear something that you were involved in? I thought that there was something going on with you and the Greco organization or Greco-Roman wrestling to try to get something.
I know we were going to try and do a gala specifically for Greco-Roman wrestling this spring, and all this COVID stuff kind of postponed that.
Is that with Hendo?
That was with Coach Linlin. I'm sure we'll bring Hendo in. I think Chael Sonnen's going to be involved. Some of us guys that took that Greco background and translated it to championships in MMA and in fighting, where there's, a little more notoriety of all the styles of wrestling that I've been involved in, and I've been in several different ones. Greco is the one that translates the best to mixed martial arts because of the upright posture, because of the clinch and infighting, and the fact that you have a solid barrier to trap guys against. Greco translates very, very well to mixed arts. And I think a lot of people don't really recognize that, or a lot of wrestlers don't recognize that, at least yet. So I think that's something that guys like me and Henderson and Chael Sonnen and Matt Linlin want to highlight, because there's a lot of guys that are aspiring to be mixed martial artists, and they're using wrestling as their foundation, as their jumping off point. So Greco is definitely a style you'd want to focus on if that's your goal.
You hear the term, you could sell ice to an Eskimo, thrown around about guys that can talk their way into and out of a fight before the fight really even starts, and I kind of prided myself in that at one time in my life. One of my other friends on a podcast earlier, he's from Georgia. He's a redneck, Randy. He said, yeah, that guy could sell a hat rack to a moose, which I thought that was a really good analogy, right? So that's a pretty good little redneck analogy right there. But when you hear the name Chael Sonnen, is he a badass? Is he a stud? Or is he just a lot of selling ice to an Eskimo? Because the dude is an unreal speaker. He seems so intelligent. But I know the end game of like that he is a stud wrestler and that he is a workhorse and that he is a badass. But he says stuff that makes me go, is he really the highest paid fighter of all time? And did he really retire? Is is this all a deal to get people like me to tune back in to see what he's going to say next? Because it's just like, he's not the highest paid fighter of all time, or that he left the sport of I hear all of this and I'm like, this guy is just like, he's a salesman, right?
He is a character for sure. He's this guy, very smart guy. You're very right. He's a very intelligent young man. I've known him since he was in high school. We tried to recruit him to Oregon State when I was coaching there. He ended up at the University of Oregon, so we had to coach against him. And then obviously when he started his MMA career, we were the guys that started him. He was an alternate on the Greco team in 2000 for the Olympics. Wrestled at the very highest level, both collegiately and internationally, and then translated that into mixed martial arts. And he's one of those guys that saw the handwriting on the wall. He saw what Tito was kind of the first guy to take his mouth and use that to generate heat and use it as a tool for marketing himself as a fighter. And then, Baroni and some of these other guys along that did a lot of those same things. Chael took that to a whole new level, and then Conor McGregor took what Chael was doing and elevated it even more into these publicity stunts and these things that we're seeing now. It's all ploy, psychological warfare in some ways to try and get in your opponent's head, create doubts there or frustration and anger. You want that guy thinking about anything but tactically and technically how to go out and beat you. So you can use some of those psychological warfare, if you will, to your advantage in some cases. And that's exactly what Chael's done. And he's now used it to market himself. He's a great commentator. He's smart. He's usually got a great perception or perspective on things. So I think he's very, very good at that. And he's done that based on this persona that he created as a fighter.
So with his intelligence level, would you have him on your team as a coach? Would you have him in your boardroom as a CEO? Would you have him as a national sales manager? Would he be in the Randy Couture organization to go out and take on the business world, whether it was the Greco-Roman gala, whether it was going into a Hollywood production meeting and representing your brand, or whether it was going into a huge retailer to sell your clothing to? Does Chael Sonnen make the cut as part of the Couture organization?
He would, absolutely.
Really?
He was with Team Quest. He's part of the team almost from day one. So, yeah, he would absolutely make the cut. No doubt about it.
Awesome. Yeah, I listen to his stuff and I watch him and I'm just like, this dude is thinking on such a different level than most people do during the day. And he just knows it. He just knows he's manipulating the deal, his questioning and everything. I'm like, I see where you're going with this. I'd love to sit down with him just to learn. Like I know I could pick up on a lot of his of what he does. He just seems like he's a very smart and intelligent and well-read person. It seems like to me. Let's talk about one more personality before I get back to you, and then I'll let you go. I really appreciate the time, and hopefully we can do this again someday. Joe Rogan and what he means to the culture of MMA. He's out there. He talks freely about marijuana use. He talks about elk and hunting, and he eats wild elk, and I love it. He's very open and transparent, just like you are. He's a very vulgar comedian that uses profanity. He's in a position to where he can do that in front of that crowd, but he also has the responsibility not to talk like that when he's doing the commentating for the UFC. Sometimes a little bit he slips, but he knows he's got a younger crowd and a younger generation watching. Very respectful of that. How instrumental has he been since the early days of UFC? Is he a good spokesperson for MMA? Does he walk the walk and talk the talk with his ability to train and his background and his knowledge of jiu-jitsu and other disciplines? Are you a fan of Joe Rogan is, I guess, the bottom line question.
Well, I think Joe Rogan is 100% authentic. And I mean, he was literally at every single fight I ever had for the UFC. He was doing the backstage interviews, my very first fight, UFC 13. He wasn't in the booth yet doing the commentary in the booth, but he's a very skilled practitioner of martial arts. I think he had an early start in Taekwondo, if I'm not mistaken. But he's obviously a long time practitioner of jiu-jitsu. He loves striking and kickboxing. Absolutely capable as an individual. What I love about Joe is he's not afraid to stand up for what he believes in. You talked about the marijuana. He's one of the most vocal and first people to stand up for legalization. And he talks about kind of alter helped him or a god or whatever. And those things are interesting to me. And somebody that's, like you said, that transparent, that wide open, wears that on his sleeve and stands behind that. You got to respect that kind of character. Somebody that's willing to do that and backs that up. So I've always liked Joe. I think Joe's tremendous. Obviously, his podcast is kicking butt and taking names. He's very, very, very smart. It's very clever. Even his comedy, yeah, he gets a little raunchy, but even what he does, it's still very, very funny and very, very clever. Well thought out.
He's on a different level.
Yeah, in some ways, he's the antithesis of what you would think a stoner is, because he is so articulate and it's so deep. It's so interesting. So, I think he shatters a lot of those myths in a lot of ways.
He seems to be very humble too. Is he very humbled, man?
I like him. He's done a few events with him where he was hosting or doing different things, and he literally drives his own car, to those events. Parks like everybody, walks in. I mean, he's just a very, very normal guy. I like him a lot.
That's the impression I get. I want to shake his hand someday, because what he's done for our lifestyle of being the American hunter and living off the land and harvesting your meat, and what he's doing with elk meat and the Traeger grills and his bow and arrow and guys like Steven Ranella and Remy Warren and John Dudley. I think it's so cool. If the UFC or any organization came to Randy Couture and this is 100%, you're in tip-top fight shape, because there is a lot different shape of, I would assume that you're not in fight shape right now. You're in great shape, but I would assume fight shape's probably even a different level. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely fair to say. True.
So if you're in tip-top fight shape, and you get to pick 3 fighters, I don't care what weight division they're in, but they're going to weigh the same as you when they fight you. You're just going on styles, toughness, respect to the game. Who do you pick as your 3 fights right now with who's out there? It can be of all time. I don't care if it's Fedor, I don't care if it's Conor, but who would you want to fight?
Well, I mean, Fedor would definitely be on that list. I mean, that's the one fight that if you want to say it that way, got away. That didn't happen, that probably should have happened. I thought it would have been a huge fight. When he was the number one guy for Pride, and I was the number one guy for the UFC in the heavyweight division, that's when he and I chased that to make that fight happen. So he would definitely be on this. If I was in my prime, I would want to fight John Jones.
Oh, I knew it. I knew you were going to say that.
I think he's an amazingly talented young man. It's really unfortunate, all the other stuff that's gone outside of the cage. And again, you talk about things that detract from the purity of this sport and the character that this sport, I think, breeds. Those things are certainly detractors for me, but he's as talented as they come. He's long, rangy, poses a lot of problems. Those elbows are wicked.
Unorthodox as heck.
He would absolutely be a guy that I would want to fight. I think because he's got a strong wrestling background, anytime I fought a guy that had that strong wrestling background, it was going to be a much tougher, much more interesting fight, because in some ways it neutralized some of the things that I relied on heavily in my fighting style. So
before you go to the third fighter, Randy Couture, would you say that in the history of mixed martial arts and combat sports, even boxing included, is he one of the greatest all-around technicians in the unorthodox and just finding a way to, he's never lost. His last fight he's lost some rounds, and Gustafsson could have been either way. He lost the disqualification to Matt, I can't remember the kid's name that was on the Ultimate Fighter. I can't remember, but remember that he dropped the illegal elbows and got disqualified. That's his only loss. Matt Hamill. Is he one of the best all-around fighters of all time in American history with what you've seen him do in the octagon?
Well, that's a tough question.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm amazingly talented, but I think in order to be one of the best fighters, it's more than just what you did inside the cage, inside the ring. And I think the same is true about boxing or any other sport. I think so much of it it's a total package, to inside and outside of the playing arena. If you want to be on that list, in my opinion, of the best, then it has across the board. So it can't just be. That's how I feel about it.
So what I said about the legacy and that the fight game, you're held at a different standard, that's true, right? I'm not just saying that for my health, right, Randy? It's like you can't step on the fight game. You can't go do what you do and either be called a cheater and test positive a bunch, or go out and get in trouble with the law, whatever it is, or go out and disrespect your opponents, whatever it is. I just don't think that in the fight game you can't go into the Hall of Fame with that. I'm not saying you can't, but the legacy's there, right? You got to judge him on all of that.
I think guys, look at Muhammad Ali. He ran his mouth and he talked making up poems and doing all that. He was the original that did that sort of thing, and he backed it up. And I think that's the difference. You're going to get away with a lot of that. People are going to give you a lot of latitude if you're just running your head and talking a lot. If you go out there and you perform well and you back it up, and I think that's the difference. It's not enough just to be skilled and be good in the ring. You need the total package, in my opinion.
So I did say Fedor, and I did not know that he would be in your three fights. I did think that you would say John Jones, because it seems to me like he's that guy that people want to be. Hendo says the same thing. He got hurt in training camp going into the Jones fight. Would Khabib be the last one for Randy Couture with his wrestling background and the way that he chews his opponents up? That dude's a bulldog.
I definitely like his style. His style is certainly in my wheelhouse. That's similar to fighting style. Taking guys down, smothering them, finding ways to pick at them and bang on them and make them work harder than they want to work. But I don't know if he's, I think because maybe we're in different weight classes, he probably wouldn't make my list that way. I don't know. I'm looking at guys I could really probably fight.
Cormier.
I like Daniel. I think Daniel translates his wrestling and wrestling background and his knowledge into the cage as well as anybody. I'm a fan of him for sure. Obviously, he's a cowboy. Cowboys, we run together. So, I've always been a fan of him. Was impressed with him the times he's been in my gym, the way he taught, the things, how he explained things and broke things down. I was very, very impressed by him. Again, anytime I'm facing another guy with those kind of wrestling credentials, it's going to be a very interesting fight. It's going to be a fun fight. But again, I think I named the two that come to mind. I have trouble really coming up with a third one. There never really been one to say, I'd like to do that fight over again. But I guess if I got a chance, it would be fun to give Brock Lesnar a go again, to be back in fight shape and in my prime. And I felt like I was so close and I had the right game plan. I would love another run at that to see how that came out.
I'd love to see that too. I'd love to see that. So I'm going to let you go. I want to do this again. I'd really like to do something with you. Maybe we can discuss this in the future with Hendo of doing something with MVP. Maybe we do a parking lot event. Maybe we can do a fundraiser. Maybe we can mix it in with a concert with some of the country musicians that we run with. I'd like to get involved and help out where I can there to bring some, our fans or our following into that, because I love to support the military every way we can. And I think that that's a great, just the model of it seems really cool, to let them get into that gym and have a great workout and get things off of their mind. So let's talk about that maybe, man. I appreciate you being here. And my last thing is nutrition. When we get off of this deal, are you a hidden ice cream eater? Are you going to go knock down 2 bags of Frito-Lays with chili? Or are you so dedicated that it wears people out around you that you can stay so disciplined on your diet that you will literally barely touch you're the guy that goes into a sushi restaurant, and even if you can afford the sashimi, you get the regular nigiri with rice and then stuff the rice in your pockets, don't you, Randy Couture?
I definitely like ice cream, and I bought Mindy an ice cream maker last Christmas for Christmas. So she's making like real homemade, healthy, good ice cream. I'm also kind of a cookie monster. I've always liked cookies for some reason, but I've been doing that intermittent fasting since I retired from fighting. I knew you can get away with murder when you're fighting, because you're training twice a day, 5 or 6 days a week. Especially going into a fight, you can pretty much eat whatever you want. It's not going to stick anywhere. Again, you try to eat good food and healthy food, put good fuel in the engine so it runs well. And I knew when I retired, I wouldn't get away with a lot of the things that I got away with because I was training so hard. So I started doing the intermittent fasting. And I'm more of a night person, so I choose a 6-hour window from 2 to 8. That's my window to eat food. I still try to eat good, healthy food and good food, stay away from processed stuff, stay away from fried stuff. But every once in a while, you got to live, right? You got to do something. So, or have a little fun or relax a little. So I will eat some ice cream. I will have some cookies on occasion, but most of the time I try to eat good food. I love food. Nothing better than a good steak, especially a good elk steak.
So you are a wild game guy.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, we're going to get along.
Since I was 6 years old.
You've been hunting since you were 6 years old.
Yeah. That was one of the few times I got to see he'd come take me out of school for a week and take me hunting. So I think to this day, it's one of the reasons why I still love to hunt.
All right. Well, you do like sushi though, right? You can throw down on some raw fish.
I laugh. I always say, yeah, I eat anything that doesn't eat me first.
Well, let's talk, man. Let's plan a hunt in California or somewhere this year where you're close to. Hendo's going to be around. We're going to be in the Chico area, Sacramento. Let's get together on a hunt camp and put together a maybe some kind of function for the MVP. And I really appreciate your time, man. I'm a big fan. I'm humbled to have you on here, and the way that you conducted yourself professionally in the octagon and serving our country and kicking ass in life. You're a true inspiration, my man. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Randy. I'll talk to you soon. That's Randy Couture. This has been another episode of This Life Ain't For Everybody. You can find Randy Couture. Your Instagram handle's a little bit different. I follow you.
Yeah. There's actually another Randy Couture out there. So they already had the name. So it's XC Natch, Xtreme Couture Natch, short for natural. So XC Natch on Instagram, Randy_Couture on Twitter, and Randy the Natural Couture on Facebook.
All right, Randy, I challenge you to follow us back. The Foul Life followed you, so follow us back, would you? We're going to be pushing this out, promoting it. You guys check out Randy Couture. What an American stud. Check out his acting career. He's been in a lot of movies and more to come. Congratulations, Randy, on a great career. Tom, hit that button. Thank you all for joining us here at This Life Ain't For Everybody. This is Leith Lofton. What you going to do when the money's all gone?
We're all equal, that's what I think. I don't believe heaven has a bank. Make good use of your time on earth, and don't make a dollar bill all it's worth. 'Cause I'd rather be